Black Christmas perfectly balances brevity and wild anger. It's a response to the radical cultural shifts about women's bodies, the pregnancy pause that made horror what it is today. Viewers become the killer. This is a defining example of how to evoke audience culpability. While we never gain perspective on the victim's experience, we fixate on what it might feel like to be in control. It calls us to search ourselves for the where and the how we willingly feed harm in a world where we dispatch like agony. The killer is the camera, the Christmas lights are the noose, and the icicles are the knives. The cure is taking your shame home and feeding it to the ones you love. It's definitive emotional plunder, trauma, and a loss that echoes like a hollowed womb. The Descent offers audiences a euphoric outlet, while characters develop from meek, protected victims to bloodthirsty hunters. The Descent is a catacomb of bastardized choices. You can go forward, but you can't return to the ones you love. The Ones Below leaves us in a state of clarification, playing off of our societal fear that children are just lambs to slaughter, that every move, every thought, every connection they have from the moment they are born will be a threat and or a benevolent outcome. A portrait of parenthood by proxy. The Omen warns us of our own selfish inventions. It thoroughly interrogates how a child becomes the identity by which you light your way and the shovel by which you dig your grave. Grace begins as a benign portrait of the American family and spirals into a nightmare that reaches to the core of motherhood. The fear of dispassion, the loss of self, and the unavoidable adaptation of pregnancy functions as a control tactic, like a confession with the community as its most formidable mistress. Mothers are forced to wear the cloak of invincibility and invisibility, always culpable and painfully underserved. Grace mirrors the audience back to itself. How far is too far to go for the ones you love? An extended portrait of where Rosemary's Baby left off. Instead of being physically restrained from body autonomy, Grace is about controlling behaviors. It turns motherhood into a complete sentence. You must live out of pressure. You must beg to be crushed by it. It reminds us that although she is carrying the baby, she is merely a vessel, and the rest of us are the directors of her life. The Brood interrogates motherhood with a fine toothed comb. Nola has been locked away in an experimental psychiatric facility with the radical Dr. Hal Raglan. She is his star patient, a kind of Frankenstein monster. Nola acts as an expression of his practices, his theories, his results, and his narcissism. He encourages Nola to turn her thoughts to flesh and release them. Her anger and frustration manifest into the one thing her life revolves around: birth. Nola births her rage into an army of tiny creatures hell bent on avenging the wrongs against Mom. The Bad Seed is about the naivete of parenthood. It's about seeing what you want rather than what is being laid out, a series of incidents, behaviors, and actions. It studies the reality that your child's reputation is your salvation. Right or wrong, nothing will ever be more substantial than what it looks like on the outside. It also shows us that sacrifice looks like giving up and wearing the weight alone, so you don't have to wear it on the front page. Swallow clarifies that the sight of two blue lines is the end of an era and a time lapse that cannot be avoided. Your body now belongs to your child and everyone invested in that child's survival. It shows the amount of control and obsession that comes with the excitement of being a new dad, a grandmother, a grandfather, and building a legacy of flesh and blood on a woman's fatal wish. It's a battle mothers can't win because as she lives for herself, she sends her child to the gallows. Rosemary's Baby is the most in depth interrogation of motherhood and reproductive rights committed to celluloid. Guy Woodhouse, a struggling actor, spends most of the film concerned about his career and the impending birth of his first child. Coincidentally, his pregnant wife is no concern to him. Her womb is a bargaining chip in pursuit of power. It's the battleground we waged war on before leaving them to clean up the mess we made. Pyewacket is a cautionary tale about the fragile relationship between parent and child, how easily it can be modified, how easily it can be tainted, and how easily it can become the most toxic entanglement of your life. For parents, there's a warning about doing what you say rather than saying what you want your children to do. For children, it's a warning about the long game, teaching you that the absent parent isn't the solution, but they aren't the agent of chaos either. At the time of the film's release, our cultural consciousness around women's reproductive rights was rapidly evolving and juxtaposed a barbaric code of conduct standard in the American healthcare system. The moral bending storyline explores anxieties around childbirth, Western medicine, and how religious ideation can be an escape plan. The film incubates at the void between willful obedience and retaining autonomy, as we're tricked into being unburdened by the right to govern our own bodies. It makes a case for empathy under the most dismal conditions and arrests our addiction to the exception rather than the rule. French horror dismantles our basic desires and immutable conditions. The film is a notorious love letter, worshiping the violence of pregnancy as an agent for social change. It suggests women's bodies are simply a means to an end, a product to be updated, and a destiny that can't be avoided. Pregnancy is glorious, but sometimes it's the villain in our lives, leaving us slaughtered and martyred to suffering. A three-dimensional portrait of a mother in grief. She feels pain, makes mistakes, and falls short of the fantasy. It maps motherhood as an incidental trap, a misery disguised as an offering. We demand that mothers suffer silently and sell their souls to the highest bidder.
Don't you ever raise your voice at me! I am your mother!
Farmhouse plays parenthood as a consequence, a shadow you can never escape. It suggests that parenthood manifests as a default rather than a choice. It locks into the reality that what is present on the surface in photographs and in curated memories is a code of conduct, because parenthood can be a production and all the world a stage. The true story of a pregnant writer trapped in her car and buried under the snow. Centigrade offers a slow burn on the gears with which we gaslight mothers-to-be. It turns concerns into irrational backlash. Instead of accepting it as an instinct to protect their most precious cargo, it underscores the reality that motherhood is more than a title.
You have made millions off the story of her murder. You're obsessed with her, and you're obsessed with her daughter!
Of all the mothers in modern horror cinema, Maureen Prescott is the most degraded, disrespected, and ill-conceived in the minds of viewers. Scream 3 is demeaned as the least favorite in the franchise. Surprisingly, it's fixated on a woman's trauma and holds up a mirror to our line of sight. We must study how this happens to so many women, who then become mothers and are expected not to leave these dark paths in their wake. The dead body of a woman becomes a plot device for a distorted view of sex and power. Maureen has become a punchline to all of us. Whether it's the Hollywood mogul who directed her gang rape, the son who in his rage of being rejected seeks revenge instead of the urge to avenge, a teenage boy who can't place the blame where it belongs, or a daughter who's been traumatized into blaming the victim. Scream 3 puts us all under a microscope.
You're gonna pay for the life you stole from me, Sid. For the mother, and for the family, and for the stardom, and goddamn it, everything you had that should have been mine!
God, why don't you stop your whining and get on with it? I've heard this shit before!
Stop!
You know why you kill people, Roman, do you?
Don't want to hear it!
Because you choose to! There is no one else to blame!
Fucking damn it!
Why don't you take some fucking responsibility?
Fuck you!